This week on HomeKit News, the SwitchBot weather station, or something else. Welcome back everybody. Today we're looking at a new device from SwitchBot that is something I'd argue is fairly unique in some ways. This is the SwitchBot weather station, although actually I'm told it's already been renamed the e-ink home dashboard. For now I'll continue to refer to it as the weather station, which is essentially what it is for the most part. Now, although this is a Matter compatible device to a degree, you won't find the Matter logo mentioned on the box. To get it into your Matter platform of choice, you will need one of the company's Matter hubs like the Hub 3, the Hub Mini with Matter, or the Hub 2. That aside, let's have a look at the features, starting with a 7.5-inch e-ink display, which is also backlit, or frontlit even, when required. It also has audible alerts for various types of notifications, and it has two single press smart buttons that can be exposed to Apple Home via Matter. But there's more. There's also built-in temperature and humidity sensors, which are also exposed to Matter. It can download local weather data. It can also sync with calendars from multiple sources like Google, iCloud, Outlook and Yahoo, and it has a built-in clock with alarm options. Whilst this might sound less relevant to smart homes in some ways, I do think it's going to be of use to a lot of people nonetheless. SwitchBot also sent me a set of sensors to test with the weather station, so I have the Meter Pro, which also measures CO2 levels, the Plus version of their temperature and humidity sensor, and finally their indoor-outdoor sensor, which I'll be using on our balcony. Now, whilst the data from these devices will show up on the weather station, the programmable buttons can also control other SwitchBot devices like my robot vacuum K11 Plus and the recently reviewed standing circulator fan, which I'll demonstrate later. Let's now have a quick look at what comes in the box. So you get the weather station itself, which is essentially a digital picture frame, which in my opinion should make it blend in quite well, especially as it's not too thick at only 15mm or 0.6 inches deep. There's a ton of paperwork with manuals in different languages, and in this smaller box you get a few additional things. There are a couple of rubber feet for which I'll demonstrate their use in a bit. You also have a couple of feet to use if you want to sit it on a desktop, but you also have a bar that allows the weather station to be easily wall mounted. There's a SIM pin to reset the unit, and finally a USB-A to USB-C cable for either permanently powering the device or recharging the built-in battery. Let's have a closer look at the weather station now, starting at the back, and there's a square recess for plugging in the USB-C cable. You have two holes for the desktop legs, what I assume is a speaker in the corner, and some vents for the temperature and humidity sensors. In the corner near the sensors there's a small pairing button, and along the top edge of the frame you have another button that serves a few purposes which we'll get into later. To fit the desktop legs, it's actually very straightforward and they're easy to insert or remove. Likewise, the wall mounting bracket is just as easy to fit, although this has a double-sided sticker, so placement is a little more permanent. The two small feet that you saw earlier are to ensure that if you do mount the station on a wall, there's less movement or travel when pressing the buttons, and yes, we will get to the buttons soon. For this device you do need to set it up in the SwitchBot app for a variety of reasons, but the process is pretty simple. Now, funnily enough, this is a Wi-Fi device and uses the 2.4 GHz band only, but it only uses Wi-Fi when it needs to download external weather data. So much of the time it won't be using Wi-Fi and it'll only be using Bluetooth. Once it downloads the new data, Wi-Fi is essentially turned off. There was also an update waiting, and so that was also installed, which is advisable. With the process complete, a quick look shows that it's in the app now, but of course I want to get this into Apple Home too. Unfortunately, at the time of recording this video, I was unable to get it to show up as a secondary device via the Hub 3 in order to expose it to Matter. However, by the time you see this video, there should be an update to fix this. I was eventually able to add it to another SwitchBot hub that then exposed it to Apple Home, thankfully. Now, when it comes to placement, I wasn't sure where to put it initially, but eventually I decided to stick it to this surface, which is in the living room, but also close to the dining room, which is where other SwitchBot devices reside, like my standing circulator fan. Let me quickly demonstrate the backlight first. So pressing the top button once turns the backlight on, and it'll stay on as long as you're tapping any of the buttons below and turn off when there's no activity. The display doesn't look so great with the backlight on, to be honest, but it can be useful, of course. Let's now get into the basic home screen for the weather station before we delve deeper into the other features. So this is the default layout, which covers a ton of information, mostly based around weather. However, you can simplify it slightly by choosing the minimal option, which essentially removes the middle section and expands the weekly forecast to fill that space. This makes it easier to read for some, especially if you don't need the more detailed information. Let's have a quick look at the weather station in Apple Home now, and if we scroll to the bottom of this particular room, you could see I've got two buttons labelled accordingly. This is one of them, and you can see it offers only a single press, which still allows you to trigger a scene or a special feature of a device in Apple Home. The same, of course, applies to the second button. Now, if we scroll to the top of the page and go into temperature, I've got the weather station's temperature sensor showing up alongside other sensors. Nothing amazing, but it's in Apple Home at least. Once again, the same applies to the humidity sensor, and of course these are in Apple Home, so they can also be used in automations. Back to the display now, and at the top it tells you my location, and next to that is the last time data was synced to this panel. Below this is a section telling you today's date, the time, and the weather and temperature for the day. Below that are two devices you can choose yourself, which is in my case showing the readings from the sensors in the panel itself, as well as readings from the outdoor SwitchBot sensor. Below this are times for sunset and sunrise based on my location. Then in the middle, if you choose the default screen, is a ton of information relating to air quality, pollen count, wind speed and direction, UV index, precipitation, visibility and even air pressure. All of these use data that the panel downloads periodically when using Wi-Fi. On the right hand side is the basic 7-day forecast with maximum and minimum temperatures, approximate weather conditions and the chance of rain in percentage. One thing I nearly forgot is the battery indicator in the top right corner, which is useful if you decide to use it without the USB-C cable. Below the screen are 4 buttons, with only this one button essentially retaining one specific set of features, so it's not really customizable. The last buttons are the programmable ones you saw in Apple Home earlier, which I've already assigned, as you can see. The first button changes to some degree based on what additional screens you've chosen to add, but also acts as a sort of home button. So tapping on it from this screen takes me to the readings for all 4 sensor devices I've added to it. So these readings are from the weather station itself, whilst the second one is the Meter Pro, which also shows CO2 levels. The third box represents the sensors for my SwitchBot Hub 3, which is in the dining room, and the fourth is the indoor-outdoor sensor I've placed on our balcony to give rough ideas of the outdoor numbers. Pressing the first button again takes me to the calendar. Now this shows the full month, so you can see if there are any events on a particular day, as well as what day a specific date falls on. You still get the time and basic weather metrics at the top. Another press takes me to a daily overview, which is for the weather broken down into 4-hour intervals starting at 8 AM and finishing at 8 PM. Pressing the same button again in this case takes me to an hourly breakdown of the day's weather with a sort of line graph to represent increases or decreases in temperature and humidity, and I do like this view quite a lot. The second, more functionally fixed button is calendar related, and pressing it takes you to another day's schedule, which in this case has nothing, but you can tap on it again, taking you to a 3-day view. You can also see at the top that I've got 2 calendars active, a Google one and an iCloud one. On this particular page, the 2 programmable buttons actually change and provide different functions. So the last button allows me to switch between these 2 calendars, which is useful if you have more than one calendar or you share calendars with somebody else in the family. If, unlike me, your calendar gets pretty full, the third button allows you to go to a second page of events so you can see everything on a particular 3-day period. After all these pages, the first button then becomes the home page again, so then you can take it back to the start. Back to the two programmable buttons I mentioned earlier are now in use, although I've decided not to trigger Apple Home scenes or automations and instead control two SwitchBot devices directly. The first of these controls the standing circulator fan, simply turning it on or off, whilst the second button triggers a specific scene in the SwitchBot app that gets the K11 Plus vacuum to clean the dining room, which is the reason for placing the station close to that particular room. The weather station can also generate alarms if needed. I can turn them on or off or even snooze them, which makes it a decent device to have on your bedside table. You can set up as many custom alarms as you want in the SwitchBot app and specify the day and time as well as giving them labels. The sound you heard is one of 3 sounds available on the device with 3 preset volume levels to choose from. Now when it comes to the SwitchBot app, there are a lot more options and too many to go into right now, but one useful option is for calibrating the 2 sensors in the device if you think they're off by a degree or a percentage. You can also turn these button sounds on or off, and you can also choose what you see on subsequent screens, ranging from things like a daily quote, a countdown option, monthly or weekly schedules, and a custom option which requires access to the SwitchBot API, so you can create anything from a message board to a pet feeding reminder and even stock prices. Finally, to the pros and cons, starting with the weather options available, which are pretty comprehensive. If monitoring weather for whatever reason is something you need, this is pretty good without having to get your phone out each time. I like that it can run efficiently on a battery, which is helped by the fact that it only connects to Wi-Fi when needed, so that's a plus. It's also good they not only provide a standard desktop stand, but an effective wall mounting option too. The backlight for the display doesn't look so great if I'm honest, but it is useful if you use it in a dark bedroom, for example, so there's less need to turn on a bedside lamp. One slight negative is that there isn't a dedicated home button, which means if you have a maximum of 5 pages set up, you have to cycle through all of them to get back to the start again. And as this also has a calendar feature, it would have been great if you could move to a specific date with left and right arrow buttons perhaps. Other than that, and despite the minimal exposure to Apple Home, I have found this to be actually quite useful, to the point that I first planned to give this to a friend, but have since decided to keep it as part of my smart home. So that's our look at the SwitchBot weather station, or the e-ink home dashboard, I guess. Is keeping an eye on the weather something you might use this for, or do you still prefer to use your phone or your Apple Watch? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, and remember, if you've got any questions on this or any of my other videos, ask away and I'll always reply. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, show some love by giving it a like, share if you can, and do subscribe if you haven't done so already. It just remains me to leave you with a timely quote, this time from Justice Thurgood Marshall.